Day turned into night, then back into another day as students returned. Today's lessons were biology and physics. All went well except for the lunch period. After the teacher left, Jade went to Miko's desk and waited as Amy joined them. Seth, feeling angry and unfulfilled about yesterday's practice, had other plans for the period. Hey, Amy, Yuki grabbed her attention. As soon as she turned to face him, a desk shuffled behind her, almost bruising her thigh. I'm sorry about yesterday. He lowered his head in apology. Sometimes I just don't think about the way I speak, and it comes out wrong. I didn't mean anything bad. Oh, no, it's nothing, she replied, confused. This was the last thing she would expect from him, especially since he didn't really say anything wrong. It stunned her so much she didn't even notice that the desk Seth kicked was meant for her. Are you all right? Asked Jane as Amy approached them. Yeah, why? The desk. Never mind. What was that about? I don't know. In anger, Seth rushed towards Yuki and grabbed him by the collar. What do you think you are doing? He yelled. Oh, sorry. Did you want to talk to Amy too? Don't play dumb with me, kept on shouting Seth as he pushed him hard against the wall. My bad. I should have given you my lunch first. I'm very sorry. Or whatever. Bolly resigned and went on to grab his lunch box. Whew, fake sighed Yuki. All those interactions are really tiring, you know? Seth didn't turn around, but just clicked with his tongue and left. He could feel the way Yuki looked at him and knew what this meant. Yuki, are you okay? Maria quickly approached him. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Thanked her politely, Yuki. I would be better if any of you could deal with your own problems alone. But alas, he thought to himself. The work he puts in will benefit him long term, but sadly, there are too many parties interfering with his plan. The next day, a history lesson with Mr. Miyazaki, focusing on the Third War period, as the new informations about the zone were soon to be announced. Dealing with everything that led to its creation will take at least one more week, but he was building the foundations for now. During the lunch break, as predicted, Yuki didn't bring lunch for Seth and his goons. Zero foresight and memory of a goldfish, Yuki thought as he was being berated by Seth. Hey! And somehow, Amy has had enough. That weird feeling never left her, tingling inside like everything would be screaming at her that something is wrong. Was it her conscience, or was it something else? Leave him alone, Seth. Or what? He turned away from Yuki and twisted his head with veins bulging from anger. Couldn't say it was something he expected, but really hoped for. Want to find out? Amy replied as she came closer to him, meeting him almost face to face. The atmosphere started to get heated as both of them had red powers. Neither of them could use them well enough, but neither of them was consciously suppressing them at the moment either. Oh, sure, I do. Bring it on. Hey, you two, stop it! Jane tried to stand between them, but they didn't care. The critical mass started to accumulate and was too close to an explosion. Looks like a medal too much, thought Yuki with disappointment, but if he didn't, Amy would be injured after yesterday. Impressive how they were in a highly security facility, and they didn't expect any measures to be taken against this sort of situation. Is everything all right? Miss Richards stormed into the classroom, gripping a blue pen in her hand. Nobody expected it to be a catalyst brought just in case. Nobody except Yuki, who understood the measures and why Miss Richards was the one who came in because of her lapis power. We're fine. Seth was just leaving for the cafeteria, right? Said Amy through her clenched teeth. You are lucky, but that won't last forever, he whispered. Yeah, we just had disagreement about sandwiches. Excuse me, he said to Miss Richards as he brushed past her with every muscle still tensed. Okay, still not sure what was going on, but relieved. Glad I made it in time, thought to herself Miss Richards. She went deeper into the classroom and sat behind the podium. Since she's already here, no point in going back to the teacher's room. Awkward feeling lingering in the classroom for a bit longer, but eventually everything calmed down. Amy and Yuki shared a look. Her, I got you, trying to build rapport, and he's indifferent, yet somehow annoyed. The rest of the lunch passed relatively peacefully, and with the bell, Miss Richards started another lesson. Seth and his gang didn't return, to the surprise of no one. With new information surfacing, she shared with the class that the radiation in the exclusion zone began to rapidly dissipate from its center. At the current rate, the entire region could be safe to enter in about half a year. Engaging with her students, she asked them leading questions to come up with a reason for the sudden change. What if something absorbs the radiation? Maybe a bacteria or a fungi uses it for energy, proposed one student. Good, she praised him. Any other guesses? Are we certain no one is interfering with the zone? Asked another one. Fairly certain, but never 100%. Interference on this big scale would release a lot of dust and cause a huge crisis that everyone would detect. What if they use operators? The same student continued. Someone who could clean up all the debris. Well, I don't think anyone would be so thorough, But if they mobilize a big enough group, it could be possible. Very good, she praised another one. Since the reason was still unknown, her goal with this was to work on their creativity. You said before that deformed animals with influence emerged from the zone, correct? Said Yuki. Yes. What about it? Intense spread of influence in a confined region enriched by radiation could mean there is a rift. A natural one. The question is why the animal left the zone if they had everything they needed in there. Where are you going with this? She asked, curious. The whole class was in awe, but only because they'd have access to the same information he did. Rifts were common knowledge among people interested in the history of the shattering. Anomalies weren't, because they couldn't study them. What if something hunts those animals? Assuming animals absorb radiation, making them more likely to absorb influence, there could be a predator that hunts them to feed. Depending on the severity of its attack, it could either displace a minuscule or a catastrophic amount of dust. Since not many animals have left the zone and radiation is disappearing steadily, we can assume there aren't many. Crazy bad. That's very far-fetched, but I guess possible. The class went silent. To any scientist, it would be preposterous to think that a creature like that could exist, but beyond the realm of rationality, it actually could. Yuki didn't want a confirmation. Instead, he wanted to see the reaction. Any more guesses? Asked Miss Richards again, but no one wanted to follow that up. If only for a few seconds. Since the bell was about to ring, the class was eerily silent. Feeling very out of place, it echoed in their ears. Okay, that's the bell, so pack up and off you go. Remember to be careful during PI. Finished the lesson Miss Richards, as most of her students spaced the bell completely. Yuki, can I ask you again to stay for a moment after class? With no verbal reply, he just sighed and nodded. Students left. Period ended in awkward silence until Yuki finally spoke up. Did I do something wrong? No. I just wanted to check on you. How do you feel? I'm fine. Coughing and fever are under control, and doctors said it isn't infectious, so there's no risk of spreading it to others. That's good. And how are you settling in? Asked Miss Richards with a concerned tone. Good? Unsure of her goal, Yuki responded carefully, since she was not making any sense. Good. I'm very glad to hear that. Just wanted to ask since you rarely speak on my lessons. Maybe you had some troubles, but I'm glad you are fine. But even though she was acting as her usual self, anybody would realize that this wasn't what she really wanted to talk about. So, is this all you wanted to ask? Because I should get going to the practice hall for my next lesson. Yes, sharp as ever. The topic is quite delicate. I was observing you ever since you arrived, and in the last weeks, your illness got worse. I wanted to ask if you would be willing to submit out to a blood test so I could try to figure it out what is causing it. Of course, this isn't an official government program. It's just my curiosity. She forgot about the entire setting of this conversation and became a tad too excited over it. Quickly realizing her mistake, she coughed into her hand and calmed down a bit. Of course, you will be excused from the last two lessons, but I don't think it will take that much time, so you will be free to go early. What's with this obsession with my blood? But I don't think it violates our agreement. Although he said that quietly, Miss Richards still heard him mumbling. What? Nothing. I was just thinking loudly. Sure, but I doubt you will find anything unexpected. Does it sound like nothing? Has anyone approached you lately about tests or entry tests to school? Doctors, now you. It's just a lot in the last month, replied Yuki. Yet Miss Richards knew he wasn't telling the whole truth. Being afraid he might back out of the tests, she just dropped the subject entirely. So, where are we going? To my house. I have a small lab where I do my research. How do you handle hyperlinks? She asked casually. I never used one. Can't we just drive? Really? Never? Sometimes I forget how advanced this place is compared to the rest of the world. Anyway, I should be able to borrow a school car. Leaving school during a lesson to conduct prohibited experiments with one of the students might not be the best idea. Since this is a military facility, surveillance is overwhelming. After the invention of hyperlinks, cars have been rarely used for personal transport, making them less likely to be monitored. Hyperlink, being a fairly new invention, isn't perfected yet. Therefore, transporting a lot of belongings requires an incredible amount of focus from an operator. Technology uses catalysts fused into platforms, allowing violet operators to condense a person into a single, massless particle and send it through energy infrastructure to a designated receiving platform. The same power can be still very deadly in close combat, without the need for many special materials except for a proper catalyst. Violet powers are very versatile, combining control over space and matter, which can lead to many uses in different areas. Except for combat and transportation, it's utilized in medicine during surgeries, or sometimes to access places inaccessible or too dangerous for people. The pair promptly left the class and headed to the parking space under the school building. While the government cannot ethically conduct experiments that are possibly damaging to the person, private individuals have this freedom, which might be why Miss Richards expects no repercussion as long as they don't attract too much attention. After all, it's a scientific progress in a curious and so far empty area of knowledge. Students quickly changed into their suits and waited for the bell to start the next lesson. Coming into the room in an organized but quick fashion, they stood before the pods. Nobody wanted to draw the instructor's attention, especially with 5 students missing that day. Good grief. The one place he's actually useful in, sighed Amy. Missing someone? Replied Jane teasingly. Maybe he's just too flustered to face his night. Like he could actually be embarrassed. Still, I expect more of this stick in my neck for someone so uncommon. Me and Yuki sitting on a tree, Jane continued with a tease. Okay, it's settled. First, I'm gonna beat those rhymes out of your head, then I will beat him for skipping the classes. Subject to F. What's the meaning behind this chatter? A voice addressed AB from behind the speaker, sporting a strict, firm tone. It belonged to the army instructor of the operators division. He was never seen in person by the students. Only his shade-covered silhouette and shining glasses on the dark glass balcony above the room. I see lack of subject 4F, 7B, 5Y, and 13G. Is it related to their absence? No, sir. Sorry, sir, replied Amy quickly. Actually, injected Jane. Yuki is also absent. Who? Subject 0I, she continued. Everyone hated the codes, but the instructor didn't react if they weren't used. Noted. Disciplinary action will be taken against 4F, 7B, 5Y, and 13G, resulting in tripling the practice session and community work around the school. Let the session commence. Ignoring Yuki's existence wasn't unexpected, but it definitely didn't put the students at ease. With his word, students took a step back into the pods and closed their eyes. For the first time, they would miss something they had taken for granted, his valuable insight and help. All students had their own tasks and goals set from previous practice sessions, most of which was still a simple infusion of the influence into the catalytic pillar before them. Some more advanced students, such as Amy and Jane, were assigned to spread it out into shapes and create the same on the ground, pushing them to learn spatial control of their abilities. Miko, on the other hand, is the person with the most complex form of influence, which she still couldn't use to infuse the pillar. In separate, she could use different influences, but many all at once? Not even close yet. Today wasn't a practice session. Students' minds wandered, and one by one were ejected from the simulation. The fail-safe system protecting them and the machines from damage, which rarely activated, was working overtime. The entire session lasted only 10 minutes until the whole class was out, except for Miku. She was the only student who seemed unbothered by the absence of Yuki, but her pod would spiral out of control soon after. The room's light turned red as her vitals became erratic. On the screen, she was calm, but instead of four-colored influence, the pillar began to emit deep black, brown, and violet influence, distorting space, time, and reality within the simulated world. Shaded characters appeared as they were quickly sucked into the mask that started to envelop the pillar. Cut her off, said the instructor inside the control room. We can't. Someone's influence is blocking the failsafe and is being transmitted to its operators. How disappointing, he said and put his hand on the power button. The instructor pushed it down, plunging the entire room into darkness. Only he was permitted to perform an emergency shutdown of the system, as it was very dangerous for the equipment, data, and students inside. After a minute, the power came back as Miko fell out of her pod into James' arms, bruised all over her body. The entire contaminated structure has to be replaced, and I want a squad in the communication block to confirm damage. Send the data directly to my office. He walked to the glass, watching concerned classmate call for help. How disappointing indeed, instructor said through the speaker as the door at the back of the observation desk opened. Man corrected his glasses and left the room, leaving the students and staff to themselves. Are you okay? Asked concerned Miss Richards. Yeah, he lightly coughed up blood in his hand. It's just a bit of dry in here, said Yuki, wiping it off with a tissue. Are you sure? If anything happens to you, I will be in big trouble. If I can help you somehow, but Yuki quickly cut her off. I said I'm fine. Thank you. The car ride wasn't long. Miss Richards lived about 20 minutes away from the school. Speeding above the city on almost empty roads, Yuki was observing the magnitude of this place. Even though the entire facility was built on the platform in the middle of the ocean, actual water was far away. The city's base was a story below sea level, but most buildings were far higher than the barrier at the edge. From the looks of it, they were driving towards the forest at the bottom of the mountain in the south. Incredible, isn't it? What? He asked. The city, identical to a normal city on land, yet it's only populated by military and research personnel with their families, replied Miss Richards. It was built a few years before the shattering. Pretty crazy stuff people could build if they put their minds to it. I feel a bit sad no one will know this place exists. But Yuki didn't care for the architecture, nor for the fake nature surrounding him. This place was a prison where he lost everything he had, and the only thing keeping him going was studying the new world. I know our situations differ. I came here on my own. You were basically bought by the government. But I like to think about what amazing things people can do when they work together, even if for all the wrong reasons. She continued as they entered the forest on the southern side of the city. Do you mind if I open the window a bit? It might even help a little with that cough. Swift nod, and suddenly the car was filled with fresh aroma of the forest, wet ground, and sticks, with a slight note of crushed leaves. After a few breaths, Yuki stopped coughing and looked a bit better. Some color even came back to his face. Miss Richards laughed, seeing him smile for the first time in a while. What? Nothing. But it wasn't nothing to her. Miss Richards was a scientist, and connecting dots wasn't difficult for her. Yuki stopped smiling entirely ever since he and Miku broke up. For a teacher, it would have been very inappropriate to meddle in their affairs or suggest they would take a walk. Still, with a good enough reason, she finally could break through his dark clouds. She was always the kind of person who would go above and beyond to make someone happy. We arrived. Her home wasn't big, a small wooden house, maybe 3 rooms tops, on an uphill with a driveway behind an iron gate. Parking the car right in front of the door, Miss Richards turned off the car and stepped outside. I need some help. Turning back from the house, from the doors, she saw Yuki struggling to get out of the car. He might feel a bit better, but his body wasn't on the same page. Of course, lending him a hand, but ended up carrying him on her back the entire way to the laboratory. What is this strange illness that comes and goes just like that, with symptoms all over the place, yet nothing seemingly dangerous? A few minutes later, Miko woke up, sitting against the pod. Miko, how do you feel? What happened? Jane bombarded her with questions. I don't know. Trying to organize her thoughts, she started rubbing her temple. There was a lot of distortion, noise inside the simulation. I just couldn't focus. I had someone talking to me gibberish in one moment, then something pulled me out of the simulation. Four Eyes had to cut off the power from the entire hull. They couldn't stop your pod. Pico looked up to the control room, but no one was there anymore. He's long gone. I'm pretty sure this guy is a machine. Not even a bit worried or angry. Amy defied the instructor. I have to agree. There is something wrong with him, said Jane. Like he's indifferent to anything that's happening here. With help from Jane and Amy, Miku stood up, and 3 of them made their way towards the door, where medical personnel was already waiting. She was taken to the medical room for an evaluation, and the girls went to the teacher's room. Since those 2 lessons ended up prematurely, and were also the last in the plan, what should they do instead? The door answered Professor Miyazaki, telling them that Miss Richards had to leave early, since it was quite a stressful day for them. They could go to the library for now, or just go home. With those options in mind, Jane and Amy agreed to wait until Miku is out of medical. It took a couple of hours, but eventually she was released with the suggestion that she rest for a while. From what the doctor told her, it was a glitch in the system combined with a mental state of slight distress over the past events. An event so improbable that there were no precaution for it yet. Meeting up with the girls, they all decided a trip to the shopping center would be a nice relief from today's experiences. Messing around in the stores, looking at the clothes and accessories, junk food, photos, everything their daily allowance can afford, just to cling to the normality of life outside of their unusual school experiences. Even though Miko was sore all over, she always had a good time with them, not enjoying crowded places and trying to stay distant from other people. Deep inside, she was glad those girls were always around her as her friends. Hey, I don't think we should go through there, said Jane. What do you mean? We walked through here many times, reminded her Amy. I don't know, continued Jane. It feels weird. Ever since she was little, Jane has been very close to what people call the spiritual realm. Her intuition enabled her to avoid a few accidents and misfortunes even before the shattering. After the barrier was broken, for some time it was believed that all green power users had a similar sixth sense, but this was quickly proven wrong. While not a master at controlling her element, it seemed she was always connected to her surroundings, able to detect potential danger. Although being around Miku made her ability a bit duller and made her more likely to misread the situation, she still trusted it very much. Come on, it's just a quick shortcut. I'm worn out and want to sit down with some tasty drink. Amy, disregarding her warning, ran ahead into the alleyway between the streets. They were in the middle of the safest place in the world. What could go wrong? Before Jane could make up her mind, both she and Miku were pushed deep into the alleyway from behind, and the entire place became dark. Startled, she called for Amy, who quickly came back to her friends. You think you can insult me like that, in front of everyone? Said a familiar voice. The surrounding came aflame, and it didn't take them long to realize they were locked inside the illusory confinement. Some people are just more equal than the others, and you're going to learn not to mess with me again. Standing before them was Seth, holding a red catalyst shaped like a switchblade, well suited to his bandit-like personality. He was obviously very proficient with knives, and knowing they were at a huge disadvantage, started slashing around as he came closer. With every step, a burst of flame came out of his weapon and fell to the ground, making the atmosphere around hotter and hotter. He used the same type of power as Amy, yet without the catalyst she couldn't even try to resist it. How did he make so much progress? He couldn't even feel the obelisk before. Please, don't do this, Seth. Out of nowhere, Miku broke down and started begging him to stop. I beg you, you don't want to do this, please. But it was too late to turn back for him. Wielding a catalyst outside the practice hall was prohibited for anyone. He would be harshly punished, not to mention that he was a student, with harmful intention towards other students. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. He laughed maniacally as he continued to march forward. Hey, what are you doing? How are you doing that? Suddenly he was stopped and forced to move back as a shape spilled out of the nearby brick-like wall. Stopping between Seth and the girls, it formed a humanoid shape without any distinct features. It was like a blank mannequin made out of bricks. You think you can scare me? Don't be ridiculous! He collected himself and lunged forward at the construct. Why? Why are you doing this? Said Miku quietly, while still seemingly begging Seth to stop. But whatever she said now wouldn't change the outcome anymore. The shape extended its arm towards Seth, and in the blink of an eye, his catalyst crumbled to dust, extinguishing all the flames surrounding them. What? He started, as the barrier that had kept all of this concealed shattered. Thinking on his toes, he fled the scene as quickly as he had appeared, with his friends in tow. What is going on? Asked Jane, but neither she nor Amy could explain what just happened. One thing was certain. Seth couldn't be the only one behind this. After the illusion fell, the girls realized a few gas pipes around them were leaking. Was he trying to frame all of this as a random accident? But they were in no danger the whole time, since the construct was there to protect them for some reason. Scaring away the primary source of danger, it methodically grabbed at the leaks in the pipes one by one and sealed them shut. With its work done, the construct walked towards the hole in the building it had made and melted back into the wall, as if it had never been there. I don't think I want that coffee anymore. With that conclusion from Amy, three of them spent some time in the alleyway stunned, and after recollecting their thoughts, made their way back to the dorms. The overall lack of any authority present was strange, since all abnormal power usage across the city would be caught immediately and investigated. Surely something like this would cause a massive problem for all of them. That's why Miko asked them not to say anything about it to anyone, enraged that Seth would get away with this, but ultimately they agreed, as it would put a lot of pressure on them too. What was that thing? Where did it came from? Why was it there? Those were the questions people would ask, and they would get suspicious when they couldn't possibly answer them. I'm sorry it's been taking that long. Those machines haven't been used in a while, and I thought calibrating them would take me less time. After arriving at Miss Richards' place, they went straight to the basement, where her lab was located. Unfortunately, the last time it was used was before the shattering and had to be adjusted. Yuki, sitting on a metal chair, was hooked up to a huge machine that, while filtering his blood, analyzed its content and properties. Although alkalic and definitely not military grade, it was still a very reliable piece of metal. That's okay, as long as you can drive me back to the dorms afterwards. He responded calmly, yet his mind was elsewhere. At this point, his classmates probably ended the lesson a while ago, and he could be back at his place working on the results of the practice or reading research papers. Of course, I will. There's no question about it. Can't let you not have enough rest before school tomorrow. She smiled while looking back at him from the desk on the other side of the room. Why do you still test blood manually though? Aren't computers faster and more precise? Oh, it might be, but I have more hands-on approach, you see? See, machines are cold, calculating and strict. They lack imagination and unpredictability. Maybe if I see something curious, I would figure out something that, what first sight might not make a lot of sense, will lead me to a new information. Who knows? Well, she's definitely very passionate about her work as a researcher. She was also curious about him as a person. Tell me, those things that you read, are you into books or are you just studying for the next lessons? You know it's okay to fail at tests sometimes, right? Of course, it's kind of coincidence that my interests align with the school's. I'm currently reading through Obrick's superposition of atoms and the saturation, but I disagree with his thesis. Oh? And why is that? Continued the small talk, highly impressed by the level of lecture he chose. Where connecting atoms together to create advanced chemicals is a form of testing, determining the state of matter. The atoms itself cannot have full and empty saturation of all types at the same time. Well, maybe that's why it's only a theory and it is being worked on. Now it's only been 2 years since the world changed, and many things are still unknown. Imagine if atoms have violet, red, and white influence. He continued without paying her any attention to what she said. Not only would they randomly change structure of other matter all over the world, it would also be burning hot and ice cold. It's as absurd as saying something is there, deep below the world, controlling all of it, so the world doesn't fall into chaos, right? It's hard to prove or disprove something that you cannot measure precisely. In that particular case, we have varying interference between measurements, which can suggest that it is in multiple forms and or patterns. Have you read Thomson Pepper on influctuation of saturation? She was now fully engaged in the conversation, letting the blood get still on the plate before her. Yes, it makes much more sense. Atoms would change and spread their influence before they reach critical mass. True, but it doesn't mean both theories cannot be right, right? Yes, but also means they can both be wrong. Wait, it's getting really late, and I forgot I had an errand to run. Don't worry, a couple more minutes and we can go. You don't understand. I need to go now! Just unhook me and I will hyperlink to school. Somehow he wasn't calm anymore, agitated and shaken. He was in a hurry like never before. Just a moment, and I will be done. Didn't you say you never used a hyperlink? But before she could close her mouth, Yuki was already standing, pulling on the cord, disconnecting himself from the machinery, leaving several wounds on his body. Hey, stop it! Damn, this will be a mess. But before Miss Richards could come close to him, he started vomiting blood violently and collapsed onto the ground. Rushing towards him, she quickly turned him onto his side, cleaning his mouth of fluids so they wouldn't obstruct his breathing. I'm sorry I've dragged you into this. I should have known. Before he could finish his sentence, Yuki passed out. Yuki! Yuki! Leaving him for a second on the ground, Miss Richards ran to her desk and grabbed her glove. It was a catalyst she made herself to help her with her studies. What is going on? He said his illness is under control. Running back to her student, she glanced back at the desk and noticed something strange. The blood sample on the blade splattered all around the desk like it would explode. What happened? Did she knock it over or something? But there was no time for thinking about it, as it seemed his life was in danger. Her power allowed her to control the flow of liquids and temperature, so naturally she tried to find the source of bleeding and stop it. Yet there was none. There was no injury other than those from the machine. What should I do now? Wading through her options, she tried to figure out the next steps. If she notifies emergency services, she would be arrested and he would be experimented on, since his state could potentially be life-threatening. Saving someone's life gives you a lot of power over the person. Although the entire situation looked grim, there was no threat to his well-being. He lost a bit of blood, but not enough to cause any problems other than maybe being weakened for the next day. Ultimately, she decided to observe him overnight and see what happens. If nothing else occurs till the morning, she would go from there. She well understood the risk when she proposed this test and is well equipped to handle it. Still, it was stressful and more than she expected. Was it a reaction to the test? What happened? Did his blood really explode? Taking Yuki upstairs to the living compartment, she constantly checked to make sure he wasn't bleeding anywhere and that he didn't have a fever. Thankfully, none of those appeared. Sacrificing her bed for the sick student, she prepared him for the recovery. The bed had a special antibacterial ionizing coating to support wellness. With her power, she extracted all the spilled blood and stains from his clothes. On the nightstand next to the bed, she had a remote controlling the lab in the case something were to happen. To prevent the test results from spoiling, she put the entire room into stasis. After all that, Miss Richards sat next to her pupil and began thinking about the test results. While his blood was indeed normal, there was one thing she didn't understand. He should be healthy, not withered and constantly on the brink of collapse. Blood from empty powers had its own issue that caused the sickness. His, however, was clean. Maybe because he wasn't tested on before, but it still makes no sense. Why would test cause that? The laboratory had a self-cleaning function, and even though the stage would be awful the longer it stayed like that, there was too much valuable information lying there just to throw it away. From what she can recall, other tests on empty powers didn't include any mention of radical worsening during the test itself. It was always a pattern. The more they tested, the worse the illness got, to the point where they were afraid for the subject's life. What happened with Yuki was different. He wasn't tested outside of the entry swabs, yet he still got very sick. Nothing happened when he was examined by doctor, but here he busted with blood. I'm sorry I've dragged you into this. I should have known. What did he mean by that? Drag me into what? What did he fail to account for? He truly is an anomaly and knows much more than he's willing to give. Hours passed as she watched over the boy, anxious, waiting to ask him a ton of questions, yet knowing she cannot ask any until he rests enough. One thing is sure, there is going to be a long night, as the sun has only started to set. Even though she tried to resist it, she eventually dozed off and fell asleep in the chair next to the bed. Late at night, the school was empty without a single soul wandering about. The wing with the practice hall has been closed to the repairs needed the pods, yet a faint yellow light came from the room where the accident happened. The instructor was standing right before Miku's pod, with a small ball of energy shining at his surroundings. Having read the reports from both the pod and the rest of the base, he was pondering what they should do about this situation. By turning off the power, he endangered everyone in the isolation ward. He risked his subject's life, but the school might have exploded otherwise, taking the facility with it. Two security breaches in one day at the same time. Weird, as the security of this facility is strictly monitored and almost unbreakable. Attacks were also untraceable, meaning it must have been someone who could access the pod directly. They have a rat at their hands, but an invisible and undetectable one at the same time. Continuing with practices like that will be too dangerous for the subject. Or maybe a sense of danger is precisely what they need to progress. The way the school treats its students is very tame. Maybe it's time for a field trip to let them know a piece of reality. Teaching old people how to be ruthless killers was hard and rewarding, and since he got an entire class of the most promising and young operators in the making, a smile appeared on his face for the first time in a long while, spelling an uncertain future for the 1A class. Miss Richard was deep asleep when, out of nowhere, a loud thunder shattered the silence. She woke up in a black room next to an empty and ruffled bed. How long did I sleep? Where is Yuki? Sweeping her heart before the sensor controlling the lights, but to no avail. It didn't work. With another lightning strike, the entire room was momentarily filled with a white light, showing a tall, slender, and dark silhouette wearing a long black trench coat standing right before her, red horns protruding upwards, threatening the skies. With another lightning, she woke up again, this time covered by cold sweat. Lying alone in her bed, dazed, she quickly organized her thoughts, realizing it was just a weird dream. Birds chirping outside and a rumbling coming from the kitchen, she looked at the screen at the opposing wall. 8:13 a.m.